Life Stories brings you tales of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bond of family. Today, we dive into the gripping story of Jack Calloway, a dedicated detective wrongfully convicted of murder, stripped of his badge, betrayed by his own department, and locked away while his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, is taken from him. Jack faces an impossible fight, but he refuses to be silenced. With the help of his closest ally, Luke Carter, and investigative journalist Hannah Reeves, Jack must unravel a conspiracy, escape the system, and risk everything to save his daughter. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. The courtroom was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy, suffocating kind, the kind that settles deep into your bones and makes your heartbeat sound like a war drum inside your chest. I sat there, motionless, wearing the orange jumpsuit they'd given me when they threw me into Cook County Correctional. My hands were cuffed in front of me, but that wasn't what bound me. It was the weight of the moment. The weight of a system that had failed me. The judge, a man whose face was as unreadable as a stone carving, adjusted his glasses and looked at me before delivering the verdict. The jury finds the defendant, Jack Calloway, guilty of first-degree murder. The words landed like a hammer to my ribs, knocking the breath out of me. The room erupted in a murmur of voices, whispers of disbelief from a few, but mostly the murmurs of those who had already decided I was guilty the moment I was arrested. I felt my fingers twitch against my cuffs, but I didn't react. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I wasn't surprised. Not really. The prosecution had done their job well, too well. The evidence against me was ironclad. Ballistics confirmed that the bullet lodged in Darius Kemp's skull came from my service weapon. Surveillance footage placed me near the scene at the time of the murder. Testimonies from officers I once called my brothers sealed the case shut. But I knew the truth. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone with power. And someone who wanted me silenced. I had spent months trying to uncover the very corruption that now had me in chains. And when I got too close, they didn't just push me out, they buried me alive. The weight of my conviction wasn't what crushed me the most. It was the fact that I was about to leave behind the only person who still needed me, Emma. My little girl. I turned my head, scanning the courtroom until my eyes found her. She was sitting in the back, small and fragile, clutching a stuffed rabbit I had bought her when she was 5. Her face was streaked with silent tears, her lower lip trembling as she tried to be strong. She was only 7. Too young to fully understand what was happening, but old enough to know that the world as she knew it was shattering. And I, her father, her protector, was being taken from her. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced it down. She had already lost her mother. 3 years ago, a hit-and-run driver took Rachel from us. The driver was caught, but justice never brought her back. I had sworn that I would always be there for Emma, that nothing in this world would take her away from me. And yet, here I was, helpless. The judge's voice cut through the air again. Does the defendant have any final requests before transfer? I clenched my fists and took a shaky breath. I had one. Please, I said, my voice raw. Just let me hug my daughter one last time. A ripple of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Even the judge hesitated, his expression softening just slightly before he sighed. 3 minutes. The bailiffs guided Emma toward me, her small frame trembling with every step. My heart pounded as they unlocked my cuffs. Just for this moment. And then, she was in my arms. She clung to me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of my jumpsuit like she would never let go. I pressed a kiss into her curls, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. I wanted to freeze this moment, to carve it into time, because I knew it was the last time I would hold her like this. It's okay, baby, I whispered. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. I love you so much. You're going to be okay. She shook her head against me, her shoulders trembling. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Daddy. If you don't stop, he'll hurt me too." Everything inside me went still. My grip instinctively tightened for a fraction of a second before I forced myself to loosen it. I pulled back, searching her face. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. Who? I wanted to ask. Who had threatened her? Who had laid their hands on my little girl? I looked down at her arms, at the delicate skin beneath the sleeve of her dress. And that's when I saw it. The faintest shadow of a bruise, just peeking out from under the fabric. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about me anymore. Lily had just given me the first clue in a case I didn't even know I was working. I swallowed hard, keeping my voice calm even as my mind raced. "Emma. Baby. Who told you that?" She hesitated. And then, "Time's up." The bailiffs yanked me back. I tried to resist, but their grip was firm, dragging me toward the exit. No, wait." I gasped. "She's in danger." They didn't listen. Emma reached out for me, her sobs breaking through the chaos. "Daddy." My world shattered. I twisted back, locking my eyes onto hers one last time. "Stay with Uncle Luke. Baby. You hear me? Stay with him." She nodded frantically, but her tear-filled eyes haunted me as the doors slammed shut behind me. The prison walls felt like they were closing in around me. But it wasn't the weight of my conviction pressing down on me. It was the suffocating knowledge that my daughter was in danger. And I had no way to protect her. Prison isn't quiet. It breathes, pulses, and hums with an energy that never dies down. The clanking of metal doors, the echo of voices, the heavy scent of sweat and old concrete it wraps around you, sinking into your skin. But none of that mattered to me. All I could think about was Emma. 48 hours. That's how long I had been inside Cook County Correctional Facility, screaming into deaf ears. I had demanded to speak with someone, a child welfare officer, a detective, the warden, anyone who would listen. "My daughter is in danger," I told them. "She's just a kid. She's being hurt." They barely even glanced at me. "You lost your right to be concerned about that little girl the second you put a bullet in Darius Kemp's head," one of the guards had sneered. I wanted to grab him by the collar, shake him until he saw the truth. But I knew better. Outbursts in prison got you nowhere. They just reinforced the idea that you were exactly what they thought you were, a violent man who belonged behind bars. So I waited, fists clenched, mind racing, playing every moment back in my head. The look in Emma's eyes, the way she had trembled in my arms, that whisper, "If you don't stop, he'll hurt me too." Someone had threatened her. Someone had already hurt her. And I had no way of knowing who. Across the city, my best friend Luke Carter was sitting alone in his apartment, the dim glow of his desk lamp flickering over stacks of case files. He should have been sleeping. But sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when he had seen the fear in Emma's eyes too. Luke had been suspended from the force for questioning the evidence against me. But that was his advantage now. He wasn't under anyone's watch. No department scrutiny. No orders to follow. He was free to chase the truth in ways he never could before. And so he started digging. For weeks, he had been piecing together the timeline of Darius Kemp's murder, trying to find the cracks in the so-called airtight case against me. The more he looked, the more things didn't add up. The crime scene reports were too clean, too convenient. The surveillance footage placing me near the scene, a single angle, blurry, time-stamped too perfectly to be real. And the worst part, not a single witness had come forward. Not a single person had seen what happened. That wasn't possible. Someone had seen. Someone had been there. So Luke did what he did best, he followed the trail of fear. He went off the record, flipping through his old contacts until he found Vanessa Morgan. She had been an informant. Once. She worked at a bar near Kemp's building. The kind of place where people spoke too freely after a few drinks. And she had vanished right after Kemp was killed. That wasn't a coincidence. Luke found her in a run-down motel on the south side of Chicago. The kind of place where people went to disappear. The moment she cracked open the door, her eyes were wide with terror. "Go away," she whispered. Luke shoved his foot against the door before she could close it. "I just need to talk." Her gaze darted down the hallway. Paranoia etched into every movement. She looked thinner than he remembered. Jittery. Her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the doorframe. "You don't get it," she hissed. "I can't help you. You shouldn't be here." Luke pulled out his badge, not that it meant much anymore. Jack Calloway was convicted of murder. "You and I both know he didn't do it." Vanessa flinched at the name. Luke took a slow step closer, lowering his voice. "If you know something, now's the time to talk." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she swallowed hard and opened the door. Inside, the motel room was a disaster, half-packed suitcases. Papers scattered everywhere. Clothes thrown across the bed like she had been preparing to run. Luke's stomach tightened. She was running from something. Or someone. He kept his voice steady. "Who are you running from?" "Vanessa." She let out a shuddering breath. "Pacing the floor. The same people you're trying to expose." Luke's pulse quickened. "Tell me what you saw." Vanessa bit her lip, glancing toward the window as if expecting someone to burst through it at any moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was in Darius Kemp's building that night," she admitted. "I saw who went in before the shots were fired." Luke held his breath. "It wasn't Calloway, was it?" She shook her head. His stomach twisted. He knew it. He knew it. "Then who?" Vanessa squeezed her eyes shut. And when she spoke again, her voice trembled. "Two cops," she whispered. "I saw them go inside." Luke's blood ran cold. It was exactly what he had suspected, but hearing it out loud made it real. Two officers had killed Kemp, then pinned it on Jack. But Vanessa wasn't done. Her entire body shook as she turned back to him. She walked toward the bedside table, pulled out a burner phone, and scrolled through a few messages before showing Luke the screen. He read the words once, then twice. His hands started shaking. "If Calloway doesn't stop fighting his conviction, we'll make sure his little girl disappears." Luke's chest tightened. Emma. This wasn't just about silencing Jack anymore. They were going after his daughter. Luke shot to his feet. "We have to move. Now." Vanessa stepped back. "I can't." Luke grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but desperate. "Listen to me. This isn't just about you anymore. They've already taken Jack down. Now they're coming for Emma." Vanessa's breath hitched. That was all the hesitation Luke needed. "We're getting you into protective custody," he said, pulling out his phone. "But first, I need to get to Emma." He dialed Lincoln Elementary. It rang. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Luke's heart pounded in his chest. He was already moving, sprinting out of the motel room toward his car. "Stay here," he barked over his shoulder. "Don't answer the door for anyone but me." Vanessa nodded, her face pale with fear. Luke threw the car into gear, tires screeching as he sped toward Emma's school. She would still be in class. She had to be. 10 minutes. He was 10 minutes away. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A voice, low and mocking, slid through the receiver. "You're too late." The line went dead. For a long moment, Luke just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The words echoed in his head. "You're too late." The road blurred in front of him as panic clawed its way up his throat. His foot pressed harder against the accelerator. Emma was gone. It couldn't be. He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to stay in control. She wasn't gone. She had been taken. There was still time. But deep down, he knew the system wasn't going to help. The Chicago PD had already turned their backs on him, just like they had turned their backs on Jack. He could go through official channels, file a report, demand action. But it would all be for show. The people who took her weren't afraid of paperwork. They were the ones who controlled it. Still, when he arrived at Lincoln Elementary, he tried. The school office was quiet, nearly empty except for a single receptionist who barely looked up when he burst through the door. "I'm looking for Emma Calloway," he said, flashing his badge out of habit before remembering that it didn't carry weight anymore. The receptionist raised an unimpressed eyebrow. "She left early." Luke's pulse stopped. Left? His voice was too sharp, too strained. "Who took her?" The woman clicked through her computer screen, then pointed at a clipboard on the desk. "Guardian signed her out an hour ago." Luke grabbed the clipboard and froze. There was no name. Just a scrawled line where a signature should have been. His heart plunged into his stomach. This wasn't incompetence. It was deliberate. Luke didn't remember leaving the office. 1 second he was standing there, staring at that empty signature line, and the next, he was outside, gasping for breath. His mind spun. Emma had been taken, and no one had done a damn thing to stop it. Across the city, inside Cook County Correctional, Jack Calloway sat in his cell, waiting. He had spent 2 days trying to get anyone, to listen. He had spent 2 days drowning in his own helplessness. But something had shifted. He could feel it. And when the guards came for him, he knew. They yanked him off his cot without a word, dragging him into a small, dimly lit interview room. The air stank of sweat and cigarette smoke. Warden Franklin sat across from him, hands folded neatly on the table. Jack locked eyes with him, his stomach twisting. "You should sit down." "Calloway." Jack didn't move. He didn't blink. "Where is she?" The warden barely hesitated. "Your daughter is missing." The words hit like a bullet. Jack lunged. His body was pure instinct, pure rage. But the guards were already on him, slamming him against the table before he could reach the warden. Missing. His world tilted. His heart pounded against his ribs. He struggled against the guards, breath ragged. "Where is my daughter?" No answer. One of the guards struck him in the ribs with a baton, sending sharp pain exploding through his side. Jack gasped. But he didn't care. He didn't feel it. All he could see was Emma. Alone. Scared. Out there. And he was locked in a cage, unable to do a damn thing. The guards dragged him down the corridor. He barely heard them talking. His ears were ringing. His vision blurred. Then the door to solitary confinement swung open. The walls closed in around him. He collapsed onto the cold floor, gasping for breath. And then, he prayed. Not for himself. Not for justice. For Emma. And in that moment, a single vow etched itself into his soul. No matter what it takes, I'm getting out. And I'm going to find her. The walls of solitary confinement felt like a tomb. The silence was deafening, pressing against Jack Calloway's skull like a vice. He had spent his career putting criminals behind bars, believing in a justice system that he now knew was nothing more than an illusion. His daughter was missing, and no one cared. Jack paced the cramped space, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. His mind raced, cycling through every case, every arrest, every powerful enemy he had made over the years. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had framed him. And now, they had taken Emma. They had made a mistake. Because Jack wasn't going to stop. Across the city, Luke Carter was running out of time. He had spent the last 12 hours digging through every lead, every missing piece of the puzzle. But nothing made sense. The Chicago PD should have launched an immediate search for a missing child. They should have issued an Amber Alert, put boots on the ground. But they hadn't. Instead, the officers assigned to the case had done the bare minimum, filed a report, made a few phone calls, then moved on. That's when Luke knew. The department was infected. They weren't just ignoring Emma's disappearance. They were covering it up. And that meant only one thing: whoever had framed Jack wasn't just some corrupt cop trying to save his own skin. This was bigger. Luke pulled out his phone, his jaw tight. There was only one person who could help now. Hannah Reeves. Investigative journalist. Relentless. Fearless. And one of the last people in the city willing to expose the truth. When she picked up, her voice was sharp. "Carter. If you're calling me, it means you're desperate." Luke exhaled. "I need you to help me take down the Chicago PD." There was a pause. Then a slow breath. "I assume you have evidence." "Not enough," he admitted. "Not yet." Hannah let out a quiet laugh. The kind that wasn't amused. "Then we need to find something they can't bury." Luke nodded. Even though she couldn't see him. "I have a witness. Vanessa Morgan. She saw who really killed Darius Kemp. 2 cops. And she has proof that Emma's being used as leverage." Silence. Then. Hannah's voice was softer. More careful. "Then if we expose them now, they'll kill her before we ever find her." Luke stilled. She was right. If they pushed too soon, Emma would become collateral damage. Luke's grip on the phone tightened. "So what do we do?" Hannah didn't hesitate. "We set a trap." Meanwhile, inside Cook County Correctional, Jack Calloway was about to make a deal with the devil. When the guards dragged him out of solitary and back into general population, he knew something had shifted. And when Trey Ghost Johnson sat down across from him in the yard, he understood. Ghost was untouchable inside these walls. A man who had once ruled the streets, now ruling the prison underworld. "You look like hell, Calloway," Ghost muttered, studying him. Jack didn't flinch. "I don't have time for games. What do you want?" Ghost smirked, leaning in. "You and I got a common enemy." Jack's breath stilled. "The same bastard who set you up is the one who put me in here," Ghost said. "Only difference is, you got framed for a murder you didn't commit. Me, I got set up for a crime I actually did. But one they ordered me to do. Then, when I wasn't useful anymore, they tossed me aside." Jack's stomach turned. He had spent years hunting men like Ghost. He had never once thought about what happened when the people pulling the strings decided they were disposable. Ghost's smirk faded. "I know things. Calloway. I know who's pulling the strings. I know why they needed Kemp dead. And I know why they took your little girl." Jack's breath hitched. But he kept his face calm. "Then why are you telling me this?" Ghost's expression darkened. "Because I don't plan on dying in here. And you're my ticket out." Jack shook his head. "If you know so much, why haven't you used it to get yourself free?" Ghost chuckled. But there was no humor in it. "Because information ain't enough. Calloway, you know how this works. A rat in here doesn't live long enough to see the outside." He leaned closer. "I needed the right person. Someone desperate enough. Someone with nothing left to lose." Jack clenched his fists. He hated that Ghost was right. Ghost's voice dropped to a whisper. "You help me get my revenge," he tilted his head. "And I'll get you out of here." Jack stared at him for a long time. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Then, finally, he extended his hand. Ghost grinned. "That's what I thought." That night, as the prison hummed with restless energy, Jack Calloway lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The next 24 hours would change everything. He wasn't just going to escape. He was going to burn it all down. A prison riot isn't just chaos, it's controlled chaos. A smokescreen. A distraction. Something that could be orchestrated with the right people. The right incentives. And Trey Ghost Johnson knew exactly how to set the place on fire. Jack Calloway kept his head low as the first punch was thrown in Cook County Correctional's mess hall. The air thickened with tension. An unspoken energy rippling through the inmates as shouts erupted. Chairs scraped against concrete. And fists collided with flesh. Guards rushed in, barking orders. Batons raised. But Ghost had played his part well. Violence spread like wildfire. Inmates turning on each other. Some settling old grudges. Others just reveling in the chaos. Jack wasn't interested in any of it. He was only interested in one thing, getting out. Through the smoke and clamor. Ghost appeared beside him, slipping through the throng like a man who had done this before. "You good, Calloway," he muttered, barely sparing Jack a glance. "Just keep moving." Jack ground out. They reached a heavy steel door, partially obscured behind a stack of crates. Ghost shoved his weight against it, grunting as it creaked open just enough for them to slip through. Inside was a dimly lit maintenance corridor, forgotten, neglected. A piece of the prison no one ever thought twice about. This tunnel, Ghost panted, catching his breath, runs beneath the prison. Few people even know it exists. Jack hesitated for only a second before stepping inside. He didn't trust Ghost. But right now, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had to get out. He had to find Emma. But as Jack moved forward, Ghost didn't follow. He lingered by the entrance, smirking faintly. "This is where we part ways, Calloway." Jack glanced back, confused. "You're not coming?" Ghost shook his head, cracking his knuckles. "I got unfinished business." Jack's breath slowed. He didn't ask what. Didn't need to. Ghost had used him. But Jack had used him right back. They both knew how this worked. Jack gave him a final nod. Then he disappeared into the darkness. The tunnel was cold and damp. The air thick with mildew. Water dripped from rusted pipes, each droplet echoing down the narrow passage. Jack moved fast, his footsteps barely audible, his body running on pure adrenaline. Then, a voice, sharp and commanding. "He's in here." Jack's stomach dropped. Boots pounded against the concrete floor. The guards had found the tunnel. Jack pushed forward, lungs burning, his legs screaming for relief. But he couldn't stop. Gunfire erupted behind him, bullets ricocheting off the walls, sending sparks flying. He barely squeezed past a rusted maintenance gate when another shot whizzed past his ear. His heart thundered. But then, light ahead. The exit. Jack surged forward, ignoring the sharp stitch in his side. The guards were closing in, their voices growing louder. At the end of the tunnel, a rusted maintenance grate covered a ladder leading to the outside world. Jack leapt onto the rungs, climbing fast. Below, the first guard skidded to a halt. His going up. Jack didn't look down. He reached the hatch at the top, fingers grasping at the rusted latch. Locked. His jaw clenched. He braced one foot against the ladder and threw his full weight against it. The metal groaned but didn't budge. The guards were already climbing. Desperate. Jack yanked again. This time, the latch snapped open with a metallic shriek. Jack shoved the hatch aside and pulled himself up just as a hand clamped around his ankle. He twisted violently, slamming his boot down. Crack. The guard below howled in pain, his grip loosening just long enough for Jack to kick himself free. Jack scrambled onto solid ground, gasping for air. Then, floodlights cut through the darkness. Freeze. A shot rang out. Jack dove to the ground, the bullet missing his head by inches. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Then, headlights. A car screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. The back door swung open. "Get in." Jack didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the car, his lungs burning. The second his foot hit the floorboard, Luke Carter floored the gas, tires screeching against the asphalt. Bullets slammed into the back of the car as Langston's men fired wildly. But they were already gone. The city blurred past, neon lights streaking across the windows. Jack barely caught his breath before grabbing Luke's arm. "Where is she?" Luke's grip tightened on the wheel. "We don't know yet." Jack's vision tunneled. Emma was still out there. And now Jack was hunted. The news would paint him as a dangerous fugitive, a cop gone bad with nothing left to lose. Jack didn't care. Let them think whatever they wanted. As far as he was concerned, there was only one truth. His daughter was out there, and he was going to get her back. The night stretched endlessly as the car sped through Chicago's empty streets. Jack sat in the back seat, his breath still ragged, his pulse still hammering. He barely noticed the city flashing by, the towering buildings, the neon signs reflected against rain-slicked pavement. His body ached. His shoulder throbbed where a bullet had torn through it during the escape. The bandage barely holding. But none of it mattered. Not the pain. Not the exhaustion. Not the fact that he was now the most wanted man in the city. All that mattered was Emma. Luke Carter kept one hand on the wheel. His jaw clenched tight. "We'll find her. Jack. I swear." Jack exhaled through his nose, nodding once. He didn't doubt Luke. If there was one person in the world he trusted, it was him. In the front passenger seat, Hannah Reeves was already on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. The dim glow of her laptop cast sharp shadows across her face. "They've issued a citywide manhunt," she muttered. Scrolling. "Chicago PD is offering a $25,000 reward for any information leading to your capture." Jack let out a hollow laugh. "They're moving fast." "Too fast," Luke muttered. His grip on the wheel tightened. "Someone high up is pushing this hard." Jack already knew why. Because they needed him gone before he got to Emma. Luke took a sharp turn, disappearing into a narrow side street. The car bumped over potholes as he navigated toward an abandoned auto shop, one of his old safe houses. It wasn't much, but it was safe. When they pulled into the garage, Jack finally exhaled. The second the car was in park, he forced himself out, ignoring the way his injured shoulder protested. He barely made it through the door before collapsing onto a tattered chair in the corner. Hannah sat across from him, flipping open a thick folder. "Before we do anything," she said, "you need to know what we found." Jack met her gaze. "I don't care how big this is. I only care about my daughter." "I know," she said, voice steady. "But understanding who's behind this is the only way to get her back." Jack clenched his jaw. "Then tell me everything." Hannah spread out a stack of files, her movements precise and practiced. "We've been working off Vanessa Morgan's testimony. She saw the two officers who actually killed Darius Kemp the night he was murdered." Jack's eyes flicked over to the file. "Who were they?" Hannah took a slow breath before turning the folder around. 2 photographs were clipped inside. Jack's stomach tightened. Captain Greg Walters. Lieutenant Eric Monroe. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. "Walters," he muttered, barely able to say the name. Luke nodded. "He led the case against you. He's the reason you were convicted." Jack's fists curled at his sides. Walters had been the lead investigator, the one who found the ballistics evidence, the one who testified that Jack had motive, the one who looked him in the eye in court and said the evidence was airtight. And now Jack knew why. Hannah slid another file forward. Walters and Monroe weren't acting alone. They were protecting someone powerful. She tapped the name stamped across the front. Victor Langston. Jack exhaled through his nose. "Who the hell is he?" Luke leaned back against the wall. "Langston's not just some rich guy. He's a power broker, real estate, law enforcement contracts, private security firms. He's been backing Walters and other high-ranking officers for years." Jack's blood ran cold. "And he has Emma," Hannah added. Jack's stomach turned. It was all connected. The murder of Darius Kemp, the corruption inside the department, and now his daughter. "Langston wanted me out of the way," Jack muttered. "And he succeeded," Luke said grimly. "He put you in a cage. And now, with you on the run, the whole city is looking for you. If you go anywhere near him, he'll use that to his advantage." Jack clenched his jaw. "Then I don't go near him." His voice was low. "Dangerous. I go through him." Luke hesitated. He could see it in Jack's eyes, there was no talking him down. "We need a plan," Luke said. Jack pushed off the chair. his mind already racing. We can't storm the place, he said. Not with Emma inside. Luke nodded. Langston's estate is a fortress. Private security. Cameras. Gated entry. Even if we get past that, we don't know where they're keeping her. Hannah tapped her fingers on the table. Deep in thought. Then you need to become someone Langston doesn't see coming. Jack turned to her. How? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. We make you a ghost. Jack's breath slowed. You don't go in as Jack Calloway, she continued. You don't go in as a fugitive. You go in as something else entirely. Luke caught on, nodding. A shadow. Jack thought for a long moment. He had spent years as a detective. He knew how security systems worked. He knew how to disappear when necessary. This would be dangerous. If he got caught. No. That wasn't an option. He wouldn't get caught. Jack exhaled, rolling his shoulders. I'm going in, he said firmly. And I'm getting my daughter back. Luke nodded, eyes sharp. Then let's get to work. The hunt had begun. The waves rolled gently onto the shore, the golden hues of the setting sun painting the sky in warm amber. Jack Calloway stood at the water's edge, his shoes sinking slightly into the damp sand. Just a few feet away, Emma's laughter filled the air, light and free, the sound of a child who had been given her childhood back. Luke Carter and Hannah Reeves sat nearby, watching in silence. The battle had been won, Walters was behind bars. Langston's empire had crumbled, and the corruption inside the department had been exposed. But the scars would remain. Jack watched Emma chase the tide, feeling the weight of the past slowly fade. He wasn't a cop anymore, wasn't a fugitive. He was just a father. And for the first time in a long time, he was free. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Life Stories for more powerful videos.